A Hot Day in Summer, Part 2. Written and read for you by SirTenTales. Later that evening. The loud sounds of the drills and circular saws could have been annoying to a lot of people, even with earplugs in. But not to Emmett. It sounded like music to his ears. Very loud and unsettling music if you weren't used to it. But still, music to him. It was definitely better than the constant needling or snide comments from his family. He was in the middle of building the set pieces for the next show being produced at the college's theater. The usual Shakespeare, but make it modern. In the middle of his first year of college, Emmett found something that his creative mind and working hands were made for. One day, he saw a bunch of students carrying different lengths of wood from a very small Toyota Tercel into a large garage door. Emmett was nothing if not curious, and wanting to be helpful, he went over to the students and asked if they needed help. "Oh my God, yes, please!" yelled a Rubenesque girl with warm skin and black hair. He would later learn her name was Ruby. "We need all the help we can get." And before Emmett could say anything else, she ladened him with 3 lengths of 2x4 while she grabbed paint out of the trunk of the tiny car. To be honest, this was just fine with Emmett. He offered, and he was more than happy to oblige. That was the kind of person he was. "Be careful. If you offer help, you'll be stuck with us for life," said a tall, very muscular blonde guy with a very casual devil-may-care smile. Emmett found out his name was Justin. "That's fine with me," Emmett said. "If you need help with building anything, I would be more than happy to join in." "Thank the gods! Our prayers have been answered!" called another voice from the garage. "Now you are ours forever," the voice said as they came out of the garage and grabbed more paint from the car. They were medium height and looked athletic, like they were born to play sports, and their red short hair complemented their dark tan skin. Moby, Emmett came to know them as. Then another person came from the garage to get the rest of the wood. A tall guy, not as tall as Justin, nodded in Emmett's direction in acknowledgement. Strong, silent type then, Emmett thought. "Well, don't go getting all excited about our new prisoner, Clyde," Moby exclaimed as they grabbed paintbrushes and insulation foam from the car's trunk. How deep was this car? All of these people were definitely people Emmett wanted to get to know. They were so much more interesting than anyone he's met. And there was one more person who walked out of the garage. This girl caught Emmett off guard because he had seen this girl before. She was the one wearing Renaissance fair garb. "Medieval today, Cherry?" Ruby said as she took paint cans inside. "Pardon me, my dear Ruby. It's Renaissance, Ruby. Renaissance," Cherry retorted in playful mock indignation. Emmett was frozen. He had definitely made his decision right then and there. This is where Emmett belonged. So, years later, here he was, a set builder on an amazing team of artists, makers, and creatives. If he could do this for the rest of his life, he would, even if Shakespeare plays were the norm. That's usually what the college did since you didn't have to pay for the rights to put on Shakespeare plays. Emmett was just glad it wasn't a Pinter play this time. At least for Shakespeare, he could kind of follow along and kind of enjoy it. Pinter, and any kind of plays like that, just made him feel dumb. Cherry often agreed with him on this subject, and she would get rhapsodic about Shakespeare and close to fuming about Chekhov. He loved to listen to her talk about the things that she loved. Or maybe he just loved to hear her talk. Come to think of it, Emmett hadn't heard Cherry since he came into the shop an hour ago. He looked up from his work and scanned the room. Moby was there, as was Clyde and Ruby, but no Cherry. Emmett felt a hard smack on his back and turned to see Justin grinning down at him.
Hey, man, it's dangerous to zone off into space in a wood shop.
Justin was the senior in their group of theater techs. He taught everyone everything he knew about set building and set decoration, crafts, and scene design. Though, oddly enough, he wasn't a theater major. He was a political science major. Go figure that.
You looking for something?
Justin asked. Emmett knew Justin knew exactly what he was looking for. Justin just liked to joke around and get Emmett to say it.
You haven't seen Cherry, have you?
Emmett asked, still reeling from that slap on the back.
No, haven't seen her since early this afternoon,
Justin said.
She told me she saw you. Are you guys dating or what? 'Cause this will they won't they is messing with my mojo.
Emmett choked on his own spit when Justin said that. Justin liked to tease. Everyone, girl, guy, and everyone in between. Someone could write decades of romance novels about Justin, which is why Emmett couldn't always believe what Justin said in regards to crushes and dating and stuff like that. Nevertheless, Emmett tried his best to move past the disarming, flirty statement.
I met with Cherry at the library, but she said she had to do something before she went to the shop. She said she would meet me here instead.
Meet me at the library, she said. We can walk there together. Emmett was really looking forward to that. But something happened. Or something seemed to have happened to Cherry. Emmett had jogged to the library just after his last class of the day. It ended at 7:45, and he was meeting Cherry at 8, which didn't leave Emmett much time to get from the science building to the library that was all the way across campus. He often cut things close. That seemed to be a defining trait of his. He saw her from a distance outside of the library's grand entrance. She seemed pensive and was pacing a bit, occasionally looking at the ground and occasionally looking up the many paths that led to the front of the building. Cherry's eyes lit up and her face broke into a joyful smile when Emmett came jogging up to her.
Sorry, I'm late.
Emmett huffed as he doubled over, put his hands on his knees, and let his backpack slip from his shoulder, taking large, deep breaths as he tried to speak.
Were you waiting long?
He asked. He was exhausted. What? You're not late, Cherry said as she took the backpack from him. It had made it down to his wrist by then. She set it down next to hers, which was leaning against one of the pillars of the old building's facade. You're early, actually. My watch says 7:55. Did you run all the way here? She said, eyeing him with concern. Emmett straightened up when he finally caught his breath and was having trouble finding his words.
I just kind of jogged here. My last class ended at 7:45, so I didn't want to keep you waiting,
he said in a rush. There goes his heart again, beating 1,000 miles a minute. He had only been jogging a little while, so it should have settled down by now. But it wasn't the run that made his heart race. It was Cherry. It was always Cherry. Oh, I'm so sorry, Cherry exclaimed. I didn't realize you had a class that ran that long. I would have said 8:30.
No, it's fine. Really,
Emmett said quickly, nervously chuckling. I mean, we could have just met in front of the shop at 9, she started to say as she fiddled with one of her braids. Then you wouldn't have had to rush. Oh, crap, this was dumb. After build time would have been better, she mumbled to herself.
What would have been better?
Emmett asked, watching her. Cherry didn't answer. She had started pulling and wrapping one of her braids around her finger. Her eyes looked at a crack in the building's wall, but not really focusing on it. She seemed off somehow. Emmett hardly ever saw Cherry in such a state. She pretty much always had that confident smile and energetic poise that made her so outstanding. But this was different. She seemed distracted and thoughtful. What was bothering her, he wondered.
Cherry, are you okay?
Huh? She squeaked and realized she had zoned out. She righted herself, releasing the braid from her finger, and turned her bright smile to Emmett. Yeah, I'm good. Just thinking, she said.
What were you thinking about?
Emmett asked. Nothing in particular, she answered, her smile fading just a little bit. Then suddenly, Cherry smacked her hand against her head. Oh, shoot! She exclaimed. I completely forgot something. In my car. I gotta go. I gotta go get it. She turned on her heel and jogged toward the college campus parking deck.
I can come with you,
Emmett called after her. No, it's fine. Cherry turned and put her hands up to stop him following. It's fine. You go ahead. You're going to be late if you don't go to the shop now. She backed away, still smiling. I'll see you in the shop, okay? Then she turned and ran towards the parking lot. She ran away from him. Emmett stood there, confused. What just happened? What had made Cherry so what? Upset? No, not upset. Nervous. She definitely seemed nervous, didn't she? Emmett wanted to run after her and ask her what was wrong, but that seemed really weird. She made it a point to him not to follow her. He would have to wait until he saw her later. Luckily, he would see her later for sure, since her backpack was sitting next to his, right where she left it. Emmett had brought his and Cherry's backpacks next to the shop and left them next to the door where everyone leaves their stuff. He had texted her just before walking into the loud, dusty garage that he had her backpack safe and sound. He also wrote in a text, "Are you okay? Do you want to talk about whatever's bothering you?" He wrote that text but hadn't sent it. It was just sitting there in his draft, looking at him every time he opened his phone to see if she texted back. This wasn't good. He had to work. He had managed to cut 5 pieces of 2x4 in the hour he was in the shop. Normally, he'd have his cuts done in 15 minutes and be gluing and joining by now. But his mind was elsewhere. Not a good thing to do in a scene construction shop with power tools and sharp, heavy objects everywhere. Just when Emmett decided to take off his safety goggles and find Cherry, she appeared at the door, like magic. Hey, sorry I'm late, she called to the room. It's about time you got here, Ruby called back. I need you to paint the details on this backdrop. You got it, boss lady, Cherry said, walking gingerly through the shop. And why are you wearing that pretty dress? Did you run out of paint clothes? Ruby said, half giggling, half admonishing. Yeah, I just wanted to be cute, okay? My paint clothes are in my bag, but I don't really feel like changing, Cherry said with an impish grin. She seemed okay now, Emmett thought. But nevertheless, he grabbed his phone and sent that drafted message to her. As Cherry grabbed a paintbrush, she reached in her pocket and pulled out her phone. Emmett watched her as she read the text. She looked up and spotted Emmett across the room. She gave him a thumbs up and a small, warm smile and started typing on her phone. Emmett looked down at his phone as it vibrated. I'm fine, really, the text read. Emmett looked up at her again and raised his eyebrows in question. Are you sure? He thought. Cherry nodded as if being able to read his mind. Another vibrate from Emmett's phone caused him to look down again. If you guys have time to text, you have time to work, the text read. It was from Justin, who was watching their exchange. Cherry must have got it too because she giggled and dipped her paintbrush in bright red paint and began working, flashing Emmett a smile and a wink. Emmett put his phone back in his pocket and kept working. He was so glad to see her, and she seemed to be okay. But Emmett couldn't shake the worry he felt. He could talk to her later. He needed to talk to her later. Whatever was on her mind, he wanted to help ease her worry, if she'd let him. Emmett remembered how Cherry eased his worry plenty of times. "I'm saying that your brothers and sister made good career choices. Why can't you do the same?" Emmett's mother asked him one day. Emmett's mother was complicated. Some days she seemed to be caring and kind and on your side about a lot of things. But then in a short time, sometimes only in a matter of hours, she would have a completely different opinion and denounce ever agreeing with you or being in your corner. Emmett felt so dazed and confused whenever this happened, and really, on the brink of insanity. This time, Emmett was telling his mother what he wanted to do for a living. "I don't really care what I do. I just want to make things," Emmett mused. "I think if I go to college, I'll start with an undeclared major and then figure it out from there." He loved to create things with his own hands and his own mind. It didn't really matter what. He remembered how he always loved playing with dirt, sand, and rocks as a kid because he could make little cities and sculptures with materials around the yard. Every time his parents bought a new piece of furniture that had to be assembled, he would hover over his dad pointing out what to do next, until finally his dad just left him to it. And, of course, the furniture piece was assembled perfectly in a couple of hours. Emmett craved doing work with his hands. His mother seemed to agree. "Well, that sounds like you can do a lot of things with that skill you have," she said as she handed him a broken toaster. "Would you fix this for me, dear? I know how good you are at fixing things. You're so smart." And then she walked out of the kitchen to attend to her own task. Emmett sat there, taking apart the toaster. He didn't really mind having to be the fixer in the family, as long as he got to do what he wanted to do. 2 years into college, Emmett had gone with an undeclared major as planned and was happily taking all the classes he could to discover what he wanted to do, when his mother called him out of the blue one day. Emmett was walking out of his last class and through a set of double doors that led to the stairwell. He could just make it to the shop before noon if he hurried down the back staircase. Then his phone rang. He answered it without looking at the screen as he jogged down the stairs. "Hello?" "You've been out all day. What are you even doing?" his mother demanded, and with no hello, apparently. Emmett stopped moving. "I was in class, Mom, and now I'm heading to the woodshop," Emmett replied, figuring she must have forgotten the information he told her just this morning. "But you've been out all day. How long do you plan to be out?" Emmett's mother demanded. "You should be home by now." "What?" Emmett replied. He felt like he had whiplash. Where was this coming from, he wondered. "I don't know why you're bothering to go to that club or whatever," his mother said, with every degree of disgust she could muster. Emmett was surprised she was saying all this. He reminded her of the plans he had before college. Undeclared major, figuring out what he wanted to do next. The plan hadn't changed since the first time he had told her 2 years before. Dead silence over the phone. Then she dropped the bomb. "Are you serious?" she said indignantly over the phone. "We didn't send you to college to just play around. You're supposed to be studying hard to be a doctor or a lawyer or some useful profession." She was starting to get to screaming level. Where the hell was this coming from? Emmett got good grades. He never made trouble. Hell, he didn't even drink. Why was he getting reamed out for what seemed like nothing?
Mom,
he started. No, you listen to me, his mother yelled. Your father and I didn't pay for you to waste your time. What is wrong with you? You know better than that. You're so selfish. You always... She continued to yell at him for a long time. Emmett just stood there in the stairwell, his phone to his ear, his shoulders slumped. Until finally,
Mom, I gotta go,
he said in a hoarse voice. He hung up the phone before she could answer. Emmett was sure he would get a good talking to for that when he got home. Why does this happen? What did he even do wrong? Emmett didn't move for what seemed like hours, trying to process his thoughts and feeling a heavy black cloud over his head. Emmett? A voice said his name and echoed through the stairwell. Shocked out of his thoughts, Emmett looked around him. Emmett! The voice said again. He looked up and found Cherry leaning over the banister to look at him. Hey, I found you! She laughed. She had her hair in a soft, heavenly puff that day, with a silk scarf tied around her head. Her clothes were covered in paint. She must have been working in the shop that day and wanted to keep the paint off her hair. She hadn't succeeded. The part of her hair that wasn't covered by the scarf had drops of white and blue paint on it. Cherry skipped down the stairs, taking 2 at a time to get to Emmett.
Were you looking for me?
Emmett asked, kind of amused. He didn't know how he was already feeling better. That phone call sat on his heart and his head like a lead weight. Cherry stopped in front of him and opened her mouth to speak, but stopped and examined his face instead. Is everything okay? She asked. You seem like something is bothering you.
No, I'm fine,
Emmett said quickly. He didn't really want to explain the phone call. For some reason, he felt embarrassed by it. He felt like a little kid who had gotten yelled at for not choosing the right color or saying the wrong word. Okay, Cherry said in reply. She seemed to be thinking about what to say next, like she knew about the phone call already. His mother was yelling over the phone, and the staircase wasn't exactly private. Emmett felt his cheeks burn with humiliation at the thought of Cherry knowing what was up. But she didn't ask anything about it. Instead, she said, I was looking for you. I need your help. I need your discerning eye and creative mind, she said, wiggling her fingers in a casting a magic spell kind of way.
With what?
Emmett asked. I'm trying to paint this backdrop for the children's show, and all of the mushrooms look like... They kind of look like... Well, they look suggestive. Cherry said this last part really fast. She might have been a little embarrassed by this admission.
Suggestive how?
Emmett asked. You know perfectly well what I mean when I say that. Emmett couldn't help it. He burst out laughing, doubling over from it. Hey, don't laugh at me, she said in mock annoyance. I didn't mean to paint them that way, Justin pointed it out. And like that, Emmett felt suddenly light again. Nothing else mattered. He would deal with things with his mother later. He knew that tomorrow he would declare some profession as a major, just so his mother will leave him alone. But for now, all that worry had melted away in the wake of Cherry's appearance. No problem, Emmett said, straightening up and trying to suppress his laughter.
I think I might be able to help with that.
Awesome! You're the best! I can treat you to lunch after. We can even drive off campus to the park with all the cherry blossom trees. I need to be outside and see real nature again. And we can just shoot the breeze.
Sounds like a plan.
Cherry turned on her heel and dashed down the stairs, beckoning Emmett to follow. And he happily did, taking 2 steps at a time just to catch up with her. That day, when their work was done, they went to the park as planned and sat in the grass and ate pizza. Eventually, Emmett did explain the phone call to Cherry, and to Emmett's non-surprise, she did overhear some of it. "Definitely sounded like a conversation with my mom," she said with a knowing sigh. "Conversation? I'm never the one talking."
How do you deal with those conversations?
Emmett asked, understanding all too well what she meant. "I ignore them and try to do something fun to take my mind off it," Cherry said. "Parents are just who they are. I can't change them, so I'm not going to lose my mind over it." Emmett had a feeling she treated him to lunch just so she could tell him that. Yeah, Cherry was the light in Emmett's dark world, and he hoped he could be the same for her. Emmett's phone vibrated in his pocket. He stopped the circular saw and checked it. "You're coming out for dinner with everyone, right?" Cherry's text said.
Absolutely. Which car?
Emmett wrote back. "I still have a bunch of paint cans in all the seats of mine," Cherry texted back. She looked up from the backdrop she was painting and gave him an apologetic look. Emmett just smiled at her.
Mine it is,
Emmett wrote. They often rode in the same car when they were going to the same place. It's not like Emmett ever minded spending car time with Cherry. Thank the gods for commuter life. Their plans set, they both turned back to their work before Justin could catch them again. Emmett grinned to himself and measured his cuts. Of course, there's always chances to talk to her. He would never have to worry about that. The only thing he had to worry about now was the fact that his cuts were all wrong and he would have to start over. Emmett chuckled and lightly tapped his head against the roughly cut wood beam. Hopefully he could fix this before the end of the night.